CJ Carr is officially Notre Dame's starting quarterback, and today we'll discuss why the staff chose him over Kenny Minchey, what it means for the Irish offense, and break down the toughest opponents on the schedule. That's coming up next.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, and welcome in. This is Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I'm a Notre Dame alum, producer at Fox Sports, and I've been covering the Irish since 2020. I appreciate you joining me here on Thursday, August 21st, and thanks as always for making this your first watch or listen of the day. If you have not already, please make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel or follow wherever you get your podcasts. It helps us keep the show free, and it helps you stay up to date with everything going on with the Irish. Now, it has been nearly 2 days since Notre Dame announced CJ Carr as the starting quarterback, and not surprisingly, the reaction has been all over the place. Like, some fans are thrilled it's CJ Carr, others are disappointed it's not Kenny Minchey, and then there are those taking shots at those of us in the media for sharing what we had been hearing from different sources throughout the process. And look, in the end, we got it wrong, which is pretty funny because for 7 months, most of us were saying it was going to be CJ Carr. And then at the end, we flipped and said it was probably going to be Kenny Minchey based on what we had been hearing. And then in the end, it's CJ Carr. And honestly, that has been the funniest part in all of this, even though I'm definitely one of the people being criticized, because I get it. Fans are passionate, and you are free to believe whatever you want to believe. It is all part of the entertainment value at the end of the day. But we're going to keep the quarterback discussion going on today's show. And in just a moment, I'm going to be joined by one of my favorite recurring guests, Jamie Uyeyama from Irish Sports Daily. Together, we will dive into what went into the quarterback decision, how the offense will look different with Carr at the helm, and what it means for Kenny Minchey going forward. Then we will get into Jamie's biggest takeaways from fall camp, including some surprising position battles and breakout candidates, before wrapping it up with a look at Notre Dame's schedule and the games that are going to define the 2025 season. Let's get into it. All right, I'm here with Jamie Uyeyama from Irish Sports Daily. And Jamie, this is the perfect time to have you on, because when Notre Dame announced that CJ Carr was going to be the starting quarterback, you and our friend Greg Flamung were live on YouTube as it happened, and I got to see your immediate reaction. I told you before we started recording that I found out from just tuning into your show when I was at work, and I saw the QB1 thing, but I've got to say, it was pretty funny watching you both process it in real time. But now that you've had a little time to think about it, walk me through your reaction and how you feel about the decision now that the dust has kind of settled a little bit.
I would say I still feel the same way, where I'm a little surprised, not shocked at all, but surprised, just based on everything that I had been hearing kind of leading up to it. And just frankly, like, I don't think everyone kind of knew that it was trending in a way that before camp, that CJ Carr was like that pretty heavy favorite, and then it wasn't going down that way. And I think it's because, he hadn't gone out and won the job, and Minchey had, played better than him for a good portion of camp. So I think from that perspective, I'm surprised that it went the way it did. But I'm not shocked, because for the same reasons that people were excited about Carr when he committed, the whole time leading up to when he arrived, to, seeing him in the spring game, to seeing him before that in the previous spring, all the reasons people are excited about him, those still are very real things. He's extremely talented. He's a really good athlete. He's not quite the runner that Minchey is, but he's still like a mobile guy, a guy who can escape pressure. He's extremely talented thrower of the football. He's probably the most natural thrower that I've seen out of any quarterback that Notre Dame has had since I've been, covering the Irish for Irish Sports Daily since like 2015. They've had some guys who throw the ball pretty good since then, but I think he's easily the most natural thrower and probably like the best natural arm that I've seen. So there's a ton of upside with him, and I think that even though there's unknown going into it, he's supported by so much talent around him that I think he's set up to succeed.
And there was going to be unknown if they went to Kenny Minchey. too.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
He's a year older, slightly more experienced in that regard, but there was going to be some questions, and I can't imagine Mike Denbrock is getting a whole lot of sleep these next couple weeks, regardless of who he chose. But the funny thing about all of this is the most surprising thing is how surprised I am, and like you said, you are as well, and so many in the media are, that CJ Carr ultimately won the job, even though he had been the favorite for the vast majority of the offseason. And it felt like when I finally sort of changed my opinion and thought, okay, like based on the way things are trending, I think it's going to go Minchey, and then it ends up being Carr. So I end up being wrong on a take that I had for 7 months, but that's just kind of how it goes. And I think the good thing for Notre Dame is that they feel really comfortable with either one of these guys. So if something happens to Carr, God forbid, at least they are comfortable going with someone like Kenny Minchey as the backup. But what do you think what do you think was the deciding factor, or maybe it's factors that led the staff to ultimately pick Carr over Minchey in the end?
I think it's probably factors and I think one of the things is he's a little bit better at processing things in the pocket than Minchey. Not like significantly better, but a little bit better. And, that's something that I think, matters. He's also someone who, even though, we heard and I mean, we saw it on the first day, but then we heard it like, especially early on in camp, like that led to some picks being, maybe overly aggressive. But it's not a bad thing to, have that kind of mentality where maybe you want to just rein it in a little, because he can really make like dynamic throws. Like, I don't know for a fact that he was the one, if anyone who saw the video of like Micah Gilbert beating Leonard Moore, it was a video shared on social media by Notre Dame where it was just like a drop in the bucket, perfect over his shoulder in the end zone, where you don't see Leonard Moore get beat like that very often. And it was just couldn't have been a better throw. I'm just going to guess that it was CJ Carr. And I know from what I have heard, like basically in that scrimmage where maybe he didn't have the best scrimmage, but he made probably like 3 throws that were the best throws of the day. And I don't think should be surprising to anyone. They want to be on more vertical offense. They want to attack down the field more. They're probably not. Last year, the offense thrived on the ability to run with obviously Riley Leonard as well, but also the efficiency that they were doing. They didn't make mistakes. When they got in the red zone, they scored all the time. Like they were one of the best red zone offenses in the country. Well, they might not be that, but they'll probably make up for it with some of the explosiveness. I think, he's going to bring that. And obviously they got with the receivers, they can be, more of an attacking downfield offense.
One thing the coaching staff stressed throughout this process is that it was really even between both of these guys, and neither one could really separate themselves, which is why this lasted until August 19th. So let's say it's even. How much do you think Carr's long-term ceiling factored into the decision compared to what they were seeing every day in practice? Because look, you and I both heard that Kenny Minchey probably outplayed him to a slight degree in camp, but I think if you look at the long term, we kind of saw this last year with Sam Pendleton, where it felt like they were kind of banking on the long-term future, and they were a little bit more willing to take the lumps early on because they felt like, hey, down the road, we're going to be way better off by giving him these reps today.
I think that's a great comparison, that Sam Pendleton comp, because I think that's exactly how they saw it. And, there were things they knew that Sam Pendleton needed to work on. And I think that's also kind of relates to if some of the things that CJ Carr that were maybe, detractors for him during camp, if they continue to be, that might give an opportunity to Kenny Minchey. And I think that is a very real possibility, right? That the ceiling for Carr, if he's able to hit it, I think is extremely exciting. And what he can be, not at just the beginning of the year. I know they have the first 2 games. They're going to be very tough, but it's where he's going to be when they get hopefully into the college football playoff and playing these other teams there, and where they're going to be, next year and maybe a year after that too. Right. Cause I mean, either way, both guys we're going to have at least probably 2 years starting, but you might get 3 out of, Carr. I mean, technically you could have 4, but I doubt it. If he's anywhere close to the guy that people think that he's going to be, you're not getting more than 3.
Pendleton is an interesting example too, because then he ended up getting beat out by Rocco Spindler, who came in for relief of Billy Strouth when he went down. So it did not work out for Sam Pendleton. But in a way, you could apply that same line of thinking to Anthony Knapp at left tackle, who came in over Tosh Baker. And that ended up working out great, because now we are going into this season, he's going to be the starting left tackle once again. And if you had said that prior to camp last year, people would have thought you were insane. So sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. And I think that so much of it is going to come down to how Mike Denbrock and Gino Guidugli help Carr, and in the case of Denbrock, how he designs game plans to maximize his strengths. So how do you think they're going to tailor the scheme to Carr's strengths versus what it would have looked like if Kenny Minchey had won the job?
Well, I think they're going to do a little bit less quarterback run. I think that is definitely going to be a thing where you would have some designed runs for Minchey, like baked in, not as much as you would. I don't think they would do the quarterback power and short yardage quite as much. I'm not saying that they wouldn't do it ever, but I doubt it's not going to be like a go-to thing like it was for Riley Leonard. And
they're not going to run that 8 times in the opening drive like they did against Ohio State.
And I don't see them ever running that with CJ Carr. And it's not that he's a pretty big kid, but that isn't his game, and he's never been that. And I will say, and it's something I brought up with Greg yesterday on Hidden Hustle, that I don't think that, from what I've seen, I don't think he's as good in the read game as Minchey. So maybe there's a little bit less of that than you would get with Minchey. So I think there's, some of that. That's partly like, if you look at Ian Book, who's a really, dynamic runner, really, they didn't run a ton of zone read with him. That wasn't a big part of it. They ran more like quarterback sweep than they did that specific thing, because he wasn't good at reading it. Like, that was just one of the things with his game. So I think with Carr, and with both of these guys really, but with Carr, he's so accurate. He's one of these guys who can put it on somebody. So I think you're going to see a lot of, especially early on, you're going to have a lot of defined reads for him. Make it as easy as possible. Might be a little bit tough in that first game because you're playing against a brand new defensive coordinator at Miami. He came from Minnesota, so it's a new guy there. Also, like, pretty much almost a brand new defense. Like, they're going to have a new out of their back 7. I think like maybe 6 guys are going to be new starters there. So what exactly you're going to see from them? Obviously, you can watch Minnesota tape, you can watch Miami tape, but a whole bunch of those guys are transfers from all over. It's a little bit like A&M last year, where they're going to see it. So there might be a little bit more of a feeling out process. It might be not as easy, but the one thing that Mike Denbrock does a sensational job of is he uses motion to get matchups and define reads and sets his quarterback up for success there. I think they're going to do a lot of that and try to have as many designed deep shots as possible. Where you're not going to see like with Jaden Maivia last year against Notre Dame when he's throwing the ball 15 times deep in a game. I don't think you're going to see that, but I think you're going to see it more where they're going to hey, this is a shot call. This is kind of what we want. If it's not there, don't throw it. But they're going to look for that. That is going to be the first option much more than I think it would be regularly with pretty much anyone else.
Jamie's going to be right back here with us in a moment to explain why he is very optimistic about Notre Dame's defensive line going into this season. But first, a word from Rugiet. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it is time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If traditional options haven't worked, Rugiet might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. You can even read real customer reviews on their site. It's helping a lot of people feel more confident and present in the moment. Head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege to get 50% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnCollege and use promo code LockedOnCollege for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. Outside of the quarterbacks, did you see a player or position group in camp when you were there in South Bend that changed your perspective about them, whether it be positive or negative?
I think nothing too much overall, because there was so much that I was confident in the strength of a lot of these groups. But I'll say a defensive tackle, and I know that's something that Marcus Freeman mentioned about Jason Onye really like having like the best camp that he's seen in 4 years. That Donovan Heinisch, that those two are the starters there. I think that is a really, really good thing. And I'm not surprised based on kind of how they played last year. Like, I think there's a lot of people who think because Donovan Heinisch is undersized and that like they became fixated on that became the only thing. But I promise you, throw on the Georgia tape, throw on like, the end zone copy, and you'll see like this guy can handle himself in those games. You're not going to play him 50 plays a game. That's not going to be who he is, but he is a very good pass rusher. And he made a really big difference as a pass rusher in the playoff. He had the best pass rush win rate out of any defensive tackle other than Derek Harmon, who was a first round pick, out of Oregon, right? Out of all the people in the CFP. He was very, very good. And he got these opportunities because obviously Cross was like banged up and then Mills got hurt there. But I think he proved that he can be that. And then Onye too was having a breakout season last year. Obviously he went and, he had the, was dealing with his mental health. And I don't think anybody knew what was going to happen with him when was he going to be back for the spring? It was in question. And then he was back and he had a good spring. But for him to come out and have the kind of camp he has, because he is the most NFL body out of anyone at defensive tackle out of like the upperclassmen. Like there's definitely some, younger guys that have that too, but out of the upperclassmen, he just looks like a guy. You're like, if this guy doesn't go to the league, there's something wrong there. And he's just always had pieces of it. And now for him to kind of like unlock that, I think that's huge, because that's really what the defense has kind of been missing. If you were going to look at like what they're missing, they obviously have to replace, Mills and Cross there, but they're really, they're stacked at edge. Linebacker is as good as any, group in the country. DB, they're loaded at DB. So it really was defensive tackle. And now that I think that they're in a better spot there, like I really think they're going to live up to everything that people expect from them on defense.
Donovan Heinisch becoming the starter was not a big surprise, but Jason Onye not just winning the job, but doing it so decisively was a big surprise to me. And I understand that Gabe Rubio got a little bit banged up in camp, but it sounds like Jason Onye just went out there and he won the job. And I know Marcus Freeman has said that they're going to rotate 5 or 6 guys, with Elijah Hughes and Armel Mukum being the 5th and 6th guys. I don't think they're going to do that a ton, at least early on in these big games. They're going to have to rotate, obviously, against Miami and Texas A&M. But how do you see that rotation shaking out? Is it going to be closer to like 35 to 30, or is it going to be a bigger gap between the starters and guys like Gabe Rubio and Jared Dawson, who's a guy that I personally was really excited about when he transferred over from Louisville, but we just haven't heard a whole lot about him, even though we know he's going to be in the mix?
Yeah, I think it'll be a little bit more even. You're not going to see it where, if you look at say the 2023 Ohio State game, Cross and Mills didn't leave the field. Like they were on there pretty much the whole game. Rubio played 9 snaps, and that was what they did, at that point. It's not going to be like that. I would say it's going to be closer to maybe a 60-40 kind of split there, or maybe 60-30-10 or something like that, with the 5th and 6th guys or something. I think it's probably going to be closer to that. And then obviously that can change, because look how beat up they were at defensive tackle last year. And I think that's part of the reason too. I do think that all those guys are capable of playing. I actually think a couple of the 7th, 8th guys are like pretty good too. Like would play on a lot of other, Notre Dame teams, would be in the rotation. They're far deeper there than they have been. So I think you want to have those guys ready to play bigger roles. And I do think that there is a chance that, a Mookum, a Hughes, those guys could jump up and like, maybe they're 5, 6 now, maybe they're 3, 4 later. Dawson's going to be really interesting because I thought he played well at Louisville, and I really, really liked him. And he played about like 30 snaps per game there. They were like very much with their top 4, like pretty even. So he's capable of playing like a pretty big role. And I think he's a guy who will probably thrive if he plays like 20 snaps per game, like 20 to 25 snaps, and he'll really, really thrive. Also, I think he's a lot lighter than he was then, and in a good way, because I thought he had a lot of bad weight. So I'm actually like really interested to see, what he looks like, because I think he can be a more disruptive presence at his weight now. He's like just like hovering around 290 right now.
We're all anxiously awaiting the social media post from the official Notre Dame account about who won the right guard spot between Sullivan Absher and Gerby Lambert. I'm looking up Twitter now, not seeing it, but I'm sure that will generate a similar reaction to the quarterback announcement. But how would you assess that competition?
You know what? I think Absher, he was obviously the favorite going into it after Charles Jagusah got hurt in the summer. But they really needed somebody to push there. I think that was going to be like a need. And if you were going to look at after they lost the guys that they lost last year, with Coogan and Spindler and Pendleton in the transfer portal, none of those guys were set to start, but they offered like insurance. And that's what they were, for Coogan and Spindler specifically, that's what they were last year. And without that, you have a bunch of guys that haven't played, and they really needed, at guard, they're way stronger at tackle. So it totally made sense for Gerby Lambert, if he made the jump, to be a guy, hey, we're going to, feel confident with him now to give him a look. And I think that's like super exciting that he's actually like pushing there for that job. And I think it says more about Lambert than it does about like, hey, they don't have a lack of confidence in Absher, because I had heard, but even before Jagusah got hurt, that they were really, really like Absher, and they thought he was like starter level, caliber. So for Lambert to really kind of like put himself in the mix, and I know Will Black got some run there too with the ones, but to me, Will Black, who was obviously like a left tackle, seen as like kind of like a next kind of Joe Alt type, for him to move into guard there, that showed that it's like they knew that's where the depth was lacking, because they can always move one of those guys back out to tackle. Like that's the thing. And it's about getting, your 6th guy or your 7th guy. It's got to be the best guy, no matter what it is, or no matter who it is. And it's one of these things. I wonder if they'll go, because of what we said with like Pendleton, Carr, like if Lambert will get the job because of that. It's tough though, because Absher, he's put in the time, and they do like him. So I wonder if they'll start with Absher and kind of see how it goes. And then, if they're not liking what they're seeing, Miami's got some pretty good defensive tackles. Will they go to Lambert if Absher's maybe struggling a little bit?
Absher's also been playing guard a little bit longer. He started off as a tackle, then moved inside. But could you explain how difficult that transition is if you're a natural tackle, someone like a Gerby Lambert, to then move inside to play guard? Because we've seen Joe Rudolph do it several times now. Charles Jagusah moved from tackle to guard. Now Gerby Lambert is going from tackle to guard. Will Black is another example, although he's a true freshman, so it's not like he was training to play tackle in college just yet. That's not that common, I would say, across the board in college football, but it feels like it's almost becoming normal at Notre Dame. And I think that transition is a little bit tougher than some people might expect.
Well, it's tougher in a way that in terms of some of the run game stuff that you're going to do, you're always going to do combo blocks, obviously, like across the board, right? But, who you're doing the combo blocks on, obviously, it differs greatly. And, what you have to do at the point of attack, how you're going to like set, like you have to hard set a lot more as a guard than you would as a tackle, be more agile. But at the same time, you are not on an island at guard like you are at tackle, where that guard, you're going to get help, quite a bit, right? Like you could get help at a tackle with someone chipping on the outside or whatever. But if it's one-on-one, it's one-on-one, and you got to deal with it. There's a little bit more of, I think with some of the stunts and some of the slanting, I think is maybe a little bit more difficult to get used to, when you move inside to guard. But for the most part, the tackles are the more athletic guys. I don't think they have a hard time dealing with that athletically. It's about like mentally, like, and understanding that in the recognition of it. I don't think like Lambert is a smart kid, and I've loved everything I've heard about like him, like really like being studious and really taking the time. Because with a guy like that who's so talented, obviously he's an extremely highly rated kid. I mean, and he's smart off the field. Like he could have went to Harvard, right? Like that was one of his other finalists. Like, so it's not that, but when you get, football wise, offensive line, the most difficult position to come in next to quarterback, to come in and play early, because it's the mix of like, hey, you got to be physical enough to like move a guy from point A to point B. And these aren't the same high school kids you're blocking before, but also the mental aspect of like, hey, I got to know, like we check this and I got to know, hey, this is how my block changes, right? Like they shift here, they stem. I got to know this is how everything changes. Like, and one miscommunication and your quarterback can get killed too, right? So there's all that kind of that goes into it. So, but you have to really, really put in work. And the fact that, he has and has put himself in the mix, I think that's like really, really encouraging.
We'll be right back with Jamie to talk about a new wrinkle in Notre Dame's offense, plus the toughest opponents on the schedule. But before we do, I want to tell you about OpenPhone. If you're running a business, every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you needed a service. If the first person did not answer, did you wait? Probably not. You moved on. That's why you need OpenPhone, so you never miss an opportunity to connect with your customers. OpenPhone is the #1 business phone system designed to streamline and scale your customer communications. Do you juggle 2 phones just to keep business and personal calls separate? OpenPhone solved that instantly. Your whole team can share one number and respond to customers like a shared inbox. No more who's handling this. And the AI agent handles after-hours calls, answers common questions, and captures leads so you never miss a customer again. See why over 60,000 businesses trust OpenPhone. They're offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/lockedoncollege. That's OpenPhone.com/lockedoncollege. They'll even port over your existing numbers for free. OpenPhone. No missed calls, no missed customers. This episode is also brought to you by PrizePicks, the daily fantasy platform that lets you turn your football predictions into real rewards. Preseason is already heating up, and college football is not far behind. Whether you've got your eye on big-name quarterbacks or breakout running backs, PrizePicks makes it easy to get in the game. PrizePicks is simple to play. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. If you get your picks right, you could cash in and win up to 2,000 times your money. I have used PrizePicks for a few seasons now, and I love how simple it is. I can get a lineup in before my coffee finishes brewing, and I can play it out here in California, which is obviously a big plus. And the flex play option is a total game changer. Even when one of your picks misses, you can still double your money. PrizePicks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. PrizePicks, run your game. It feels like every year there's off-season buzz about Notre Dame using 2 running back sets, but when the season comes around, we don't actually see it all that much. And you had a great write-up about this exact premise for Irish Sports Daily, so I'd encourage everyone watching or listening to go check it out. But based on what you saw in camp and what you had heard, do you think it's really going to be a bigger part of the offense this year?
I think it's going to be a bigger, but like the caveat is like, don't expect this to be like a thing you see like 10, 15 plays a game. That's not what it's going to be, but where maybe you would see it, once or twice in like a random game here or there last year. I think you could see it like, 5-6 times a game. And that could definitely be a thing that becomes a weapon for Notre Dame. It's just one of these things. Obviously, the game has changed so much. There is no like traditional fullback anymore. That used to be two back. That used to be two back offense. Now there's a lot of times when you're running two back, you're running like split gun, right? Where you got the backs to both side of the guy. And it's different. The run game is different. But what it does is it really challenges the defense to say, like, well, is this a running formation or is this a passing formation? Like, what are they planning to do here? And there was a lot of what I thought Tommy Rees did a fantastic job with it. In 2021, he used it a lot with Buckner, where they would have like Kyron and like Tyree together in the backfield, or Diggs, right? They would
basically
have those
three
guys.
running backs on the field in that case.
Yeah, and they, and that was what he did in 2022 as well. And he made just him adding that more. Like, I can't remember what the YPP was, the yards per play on when they used it, but it was like insane because they hit so many big plays out of it. Because it just, especially if you keep those guys in the backfield or just motion one guy out or one guy runs a jet, there's so much the defense has to think about because they don't normally see that. It's not something that, even if you prepare for it, it's kind of like playing the option. You don't see it every week. Most teams don't do it. Most teams don't have the talent to do it. So that's what kind of makes it so difficult for defenses. And you have to decide, like, well, are we going to have a nickel out here? Do we have to put another linebacker? Maybe we want like another safety here. Do we want to play a little bit bigger to combat this? Because what if they run? What if they run power out of this? Like, Notre Dame has run two back power out of it. And I think they could do like some of that. Like, even though Aeneas Williams might not like seem like a guy ideal to run an ISO on somewhere, I mean, he is not afraid to stick his nose in and do it. And now there is a guy like Jabron Payne either, right? Like, so frankly, neither is Jeremiah Love. Not that they want to use him as an ISO blocker, but it's not a thing that, they couldn't do, and to surprise some people at times. And I think it's just a way to get more of the talent on the field. Obviously, Love and Price, two of the best backs in the country. Love, the best back in the country. You want to get him more touches, more opportunities. And frankly, like, you have Williams, Payne, Nolan James. I'm telling people that don't, I think a lot of people have heard, recently from, that he's really like kind of came on at the in camp, but basically since he arrived on campus, I've heard nothing but good things about him. And he is like bigger Kyron Williams. Like, that's who he could be because he has receivers. He used to play receiver in high school before he switched to running back, but he has the exact same kind of like instincts and the toughness. And he's got great hands and can do a lot of different things. On a different team, you would say, oh, he's going to play for sure. It might be tough with who they have in front of him, but trust me, he's good enough to play this year.
I also love the opponent previews you do every summer. They're super useful, especially now in college football when there is so much roster turnover every single year. So I always think it's a great resource. But with that in mind, which opponent on Notre Dame's schedule do you think poses the biggest threat? And on the flip side of that, which team do you think is being a little bit overhyped and could actually be worse than people expect?
I think A&M, based on just pure talent throughout the roster, I think that's the best roster that Notre Dame's going to see this year. Just, I don't think they have like the same dudes up front that they did before. But if you look at them, like where they're in the secondary, a lot of those guys are back from last year. They weren't great last year, but I think in year two under Elko, they're going to be better there, and they're good at linebacker. They're definitely like good, like up front. They're not great, but they're good. And they just, and they're really like, they're loaded in the backfield and they have speed at receiver. So a lot of it depends on Marcel Reed. That's the team that in his development as a passer, but he's a dangerous runner. And he's one of those guys that it's, Notre Dame didn't play a lot of really mobile quarterbacks last year. Not, I would say, like Reed. So it adds a different dynamic to it. Right. And I think because of that, even though that's a home game this year, that would be, if that game was in College Station, I would think that would be the game that I would circle. Miami, obviously, because that's on the road. I do think because it's game one and they have like so many questions at certain things that they're not going to be like anywhere close to the level that they will be like later on in the year. Kind of like A&M last year a little bit. So I wouldn't put them as dangerous other than the fact that it's going to be like the first start for CJ Carr and all that. I think like the team that I think it's weird because it's so front loaded with the schedule, right? And like Arkansas, because it's a road game, it's an early kick. Taylon Green, super talented, quarterback, but he's, very like Jekyll and Hyde. Like, how good is he going to be? They got a whole bunch of new receivers too. So, how good are they going to be there? And I'm not sure about their defense, but I think that is probably the most dangerous road game that they'll play all year outside of like, the obvious Miami. And NC State is it's a weird spot where, I mean, I'm no Dave Doran fan. I think he shoots himself in the foot a lot as a coach. I don't think he's a bad coach, but I just think he does a lot to kind of screw himself with a lot of the choices. And I'm not thrilled about, like, if I was an NC State fan, I wouldn't be thrilled with their coordinator choices or anything like that. But I do think they got some talent, like Hollywood Smothers, very good running back. They've got the defense. I don't think it's what it was with Tony Gibson, but it just falls there right in between, Boise and USC. And that's like a long stretch of games for Notre Dame. So if they happen to be like a little bit beat up that time, it's easy because Boise, they're not going to overlook Boise because Boise's probably going to be undefeated and they're going to be ranked, and they're, that's going to be a game that I think
green out.
Yeah. Right. Like, and I do think, like, obviously they're not going to overlook USC, right? But would they look ahead a little bit? Like, that could be the spot, right? If there was a trap game, that would be my trap game.
Last question I have for you, and I understand that this is difficult to project because there are some other factors that, weigh into this as well. But big picture, after studying all of these teams, do you think that the schedule is going to be difficult enough that it will set Notre Dame up for a playoff push, even if they finish 10-2?
No, I don't think so. I think they really have to go 11-1 or 12-0. And I know they just added, like, today they announced a new thing about like strength of record, and strength of schedule, different metrics that they're going to use for the committee that are going to take place. But I just see a lot of these teams, especially on the back end, that if Notre Dame goes, if they have 2 losses after, because they get the open week after USC, and then they finish with BC, Navy, Pitt, Syracuse, Stanford. Navy might be ranked then. BC, Pitt, Syracuse, Stanford, like, those are teams that if they have any kind of like real injuries, they could fall off a cliff. Like that, they depth-wise, they're not the teams that added a bunch of guys in the portal to make them like deeper and better. They're the ones who lost, like starters or like guys that were like quality backups that, are going somewhere else. So I think that that back half of the season, I just don't see like a real like quality win there if they needed to get it. That could like kind of put them over the top. And so it's a little bit like 2019 where they lost those two. They lost to the 2 best teams they played, right? They lost to Georgia and Michigan. And you know what? They smoked like most of the other teams in right after that Michigan game. They played like pretty well, other than the Virginia Tech game, yeah, where they just scrape by. But after that, they killed all the rest of the teams, and people thought, oh, they're going to go up. They didn't have the schedule. It didn't set up for them to kind of move up. So I really think that it's a similar situation. If they have an early loss, which they could, the September schedule is like, it's not easy. They'll have to win out. I just think that's the way it is. And then also too, with the fact that like, the Big Ten and the SEC have just been shilling so hard about how like, oh, it's so difficult there. Like, it's like complaining to the refs, like before, you play game 7 or whatever. It's like you do it to set up, the refs are terrible. So you get the calls there. They're doing all of this so they get the call from the committee later on. And it's just not like Marcus Freeman's style to be like, do that. And I just don't see him ever being that kind of shill to do that. Even if it's his thing, maybe that'll be like Pete Bavacqua's, role in it to do that. But I think they have to finish 11-1 or 12-0. I think the good news is that that's what I see for them. I think they could go 10-2, but I think it's more likely they go 11-1 or 12-0.
JB, this has been awesome. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on, break it all down. And for everyone listening, make sure to go check out all of Jamie's work over at Irish Sports Daily. It is some of the best coverage we'll find on Notre Dame football. And of course, you can catch him on Hit and Hustle with another good friend of the program, Greg Famung. Jamie, thank you again for the time and best of luck this season.
Thanks for having me, Tyler.
That is going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Irish. Thanks again for making this your first watch or listen of the day. Before we get on with the rest of your day, please subscribe on YouTube or follow wherever you get your podcasts. Like I said at the beginning, it helps keep us free. Also, remember to leave a like, 5-star rating, and review. It really goes a long way in helping the show, and I really do appreciate it. I'm going to be back here on Friday with the final Top 5 Friday of the offseason, and then after that, it's officially game week. I can't wait. I'll see you Friday.